What's up, YouTube? Terry from True Champion Gaming, back at it again with another deck list from Houston Ascent. Before we jump into it, huge shout out to the Chess Club guys. This is 8 players, where 5 of them made the top 32 with this exact 80 list, and 2 of those players were able to make top 8 with one of them making top 4, Matthew Greaves. You might know him, Pickle Sword, in the Discord. We're going to be going over their list. Huge shout out to these guys. They killed it, they worked hard, and they brought an awesome list to compete with. So let's just jump right into it. You guessed it, we're going into Spirit of Fire, and this is going to be a level 3 Merlin list. Any new players out there, Merlin is the new hotness, probably the strongest level 3 champ in the game. At the beginning of your recollection phase, put a level counter on Merlin. Then, if there's an even amount of level counters on Merlin, draw a card, and Merlin's attacks get +2 attack until end of turn. Obviously a very powerful card, specifically in a control shell to let you continue digging into your deck and finding the answers you need. I'm going to go over the sword package. We've got Sword of Seeking, which is kind of the classic. It's easy to use. It comes out for free. We have Ornamental Greatsword, which is another 0 drop sword that we sometimes need if somebody destroys our sword, or you never know when you're going to pump up one of your guys by 1 and trade into another ally or win the game. And then the big hitters in this deck when it comes to swords is obviously Sword of Avarice. This card is insane. It lets us dig forever, draw a million cards, and then take that advantage into the late game and end things quickly. And lastly, Prismatic Edge, which I saw firsthand these guys use masterfully in game 1s against aggro, realizing a lot of people think that you're just going to go into Sword of Avarice and draw as many cards as you need. But this Prismatic Edge can come out earlier than you might think to deal with allies on the board and swing and get control of the game back in your favor. So some awesome swords, really cool potential there. And then some of the flex spots. We've got Crystal of Empowerment. This card basically just lets us do 2 things. 1, it pumps up our fireballs and lets us win games out of nowhere. If we're against Erupting Rhapsody, or a deck that's trying to race us, sometimes we can just bring Crystal of Empowerment out, pop it, and it gives us enough with double Fireball in our hand to end the game. The other thing that it does is, and I guess I'll jump ahead a little bit, we can make our Majestic Spirit a little easier to bring in with our Incarnate Majesties. And we'll talk about that when we get to the deck list, but getting that card out quicker sometimes is everything that we need. Tithe Proclamation. This card in this list is actually insane, and I can't tell you why yet because I don't want to spoil anything, but at the end of the main deck, I'm going to talk about a card that can do some really cool stuff with this card particularly. So obviously Tithe Proclamation, when it enters, we draw a card, and then players can't draw more than 3 cards each turn, which you would think might be counterintuitive for a Crux deck that's looking to Sword of Avarice a bunch. But this card helps our Rye matchup, helps them not able to pop off, and is also very strong against another Merlin that maybe is behind when we are ahead. So strong card. And Grand Crusader Ring. What do we got to say? Card's the best. So let's jump right into the deck list then. I'm going to start with the allies, and the first ones we're going to talk about are Dungeon Guide. Dungeon Guide is still an insane card. It never changed. In this deck particularly, it lets us get into our end game plan so much quicker. If we're against the decks that are fast, this card makes us faster. It gets us healthy when we need it. It's a body that we can Cremation Ritual away and draw, but getting to our Crux package is the most important thing about this deck. And once we're in that Crux zone, we play a lot of Crux cards, and our cards are just much stronger than our opponents. So Dungeon Guide helps us get there a little bit faster. Next we have Hasty Messenger, another card that doesn't need much of an introduction. Hasty lets us put cards we don't need in the yard or Floating Memory and dig further into our deck. That's the big thing, putting Floating Memory into the yard to help us level up as fast as we can, or just cycle for cards that we need in certain situations. Strong card. Stalwart Shieldmate. This is a new Floating Memory ally from Fractured Crown set. It's a 0/2 for 2 that has Taunt and Floating Memory. And this deck Sometimes just playing this against an aggro deck on turn 1 or turn 2 gives you enough time to get into your Crux cards and get ahead. It's also a floating memory, so it's an awesome target for an early play a shield mate, cremation ritual it away, get a floating memory in the yard, and draw 2 cards. Very strong. We can also discard it with Hasty Messenger or Creative Shock, which we'll talk about soon. Honorable Vanguard is just another 2-drop floating memory. It does a very similar thing that the shield mate did. It's our 5th, 6th, and 7th shield mate. It can swing, which is relevant. Sometimes that 1 damage will matter, but we can just Cremation Ritual this away, Hasty Messenger this away, do what we need to do to get the extra floating memory in our yard and level up safely. Lastly, for allies, we've got Varroken Acolyte. This card, super solid. For us, we hit level 3, and it is a 3 attack beater for 3, but also the main thing that this thing can do is really destroy your opponent in a mirror match. Having cards that can just destroy their free sword they brought out with Lorraine and put them back a turn on Crux sometimes is enough to win the game on your own if they can't return the favor to you. If you can get into your loop first, and I'll show you why sometimes that's even better in this deck than in other versions of this deck, you can just win the game. We're going to talk about the Norm and Fire spells, as those were the Norm and Fire allies, and then we'll talk about the Crux package last. So we are a mage, and our levels do get up higher and higher, and the later the game goes, the more deadly Scry the Skies becomes. Being able to dig into our deck, find the answers we need, put them into memory, set the top of our deck, and then go from there, probably ending the game on the next turn, if not over the next 2 turns, is very strong, obviously. In a game that doesn't have a ton of card drawn, I know I've talked about it before, being able to manipulate your deck and make it how you want it to be is very strong. And adding a card, this does put a card into your memory, which is relevant, and we do dig for those cards we need. So Scry the Skies. Fast Cure, a card that I loved in our initial review. Can't say enough about this card. It's a 2-drop fast action cleric spell that if your opponent's influence is greater than yours, you heal for 4, you recover 4, which against aggro decks sometimes is enough to just let you get to your turns where you completely stabilize. I played against one of the guys from the chess club, and they were able to cast a Fast Cure, and with it on the stack, cast another Fast Cure, letting this Fast Cure resolve, healing 4, and then healing for 8, which was a really cool play against me on an aggro deck, and it was hard to come back from that. But Fast Cure is a way to deal with raccoons who like to eat your floating memory. This is something I can cast at the end of your turn, regardless if I'm healing or not, so that I can use it to help me level up. Another anti-aggro card, but also it has other uses, is Resolute Stand. Free cards are super OP. That's what I got to say about that. I didn't realize I was Dr. Seuss, but I am now. Stopping 3 attack damage coming at a target unit or yourself for every attack that comes at you is very strong, and being level 2+, we can activate this for free out of our hand. Just a very versatile card. Sometimes it's all you need to live long enough to kill your opponent on the next turn. Resolute Stand. Now, one of our main win cons in this deck, Fireball. Fireball, when we get to stack them as a mage, it only costs 2 for us instead of 4. So once we get to Merlin, we're able to cast this for 2, and it deals 1+ level damage to target unit. So I know I watched a lot of Fire Merlin, and I played against even more Fire Merlins. And I think every game I lost to a Fire Merlin was off the back of a Fireball turn. Double Fireball in this deck, when your level is slowly getting up and you play Crystal of Empowerment, they can just hit you for 15+ out of nowhere. 14, 15, 16 damage out of nowhere. Super strong, super scary. Fireball is an incredibly powerful card. We've seen it just dominate in set 1 in Rye, and obviously Merlin, being mage and warrior, she utilizes this very well, and her level just goes up naturally. So the later the game gets, the more deadly these become. You can also use it for spot removal, obviously, if you have to, and deal with some pesky allies early, but it ends the game in a hurry when you need it to. We also play Creative Shocks and Cremation Rituals. I'm not going to talk too much about them because you guys know. In this deck, Creative Shock is extra good because it helps us deal early with allies and do a little bit of extra damage. Because we are a mage, we get that class bonus if we discard a fire card. So that does come up quite a bit. And Cremation Ritual, I already talked about that. And sacking our Floating Memory allies so that we can get Floating Memory in the yard and draw 2 cards. The last non-Crux card in the main is going to be these 2 Disintegrates. Disintegrate is the Majestic Spirit killer. So in this deck that utilizes fireballs, the Majestic Spirit is really annoying to deal with because I can't just double fireball my opponent's face. If my opponent has Majestic Spirit looking down at me, I have to deal with this card before I can go into their champion, because when this card is out, champions you control have Spell Shroud. So if I have this out, I have Spell Shroud. They can't fireball me. My opponent has it. I can't target them with spells. So Majestic Spirit has to be dealt with first. Disintegrate, once we get into the late game, it has efficiency. So most of the time, I'm just killing a Majestic Spirit for free in this deck, which is super powerful. The other thing you can do in a pinch is utilize this to kill any ally or any regalia. So if they have a Tithe Proclamation that you need to deal with so that you can catch up, boom, this is an answer for that. If you need to deal with a Ascent Protector or some other ally that is giving you a lot of grief, boom, Disintegrate can get rid of it. So an incredibly versatile card. A lot of people slept on this last format because it just didn't come up as much, but in this format, this is an absolute all-star. Now let's go into the Crux package. So the first 2 cards, they don't need much of an introduction. We have Spirit Blade Ascension, which is the absolute bread and butter, and Cruxite. I am going to explain how this works a little bit for newer players because we have had some ask exactly how Ascension loops work. So let me give you a little example. So let's say I am Merlin level 3, and I have a Sword of Seeking out. How this works is I can utilize a Spirit Blade Ascension, returning this to my material deck to bring out Sword of Avarice, or any other sword. But in this situation, and to explain the loop, I'm going to teach it with Sword of Avarice. So when Sword of Avarice enters, I get to draw 2 cards, because you draw 1 on enter, and with class bonus, we draw 2 cards instead. So we draw 2, boom. This Ascension will go to my graveyard. Then I will put 2 cards down to utilize a Cruxite, which would return this Ascension to my hand and let me draw a card. Cruxite is banished, and then I can replay that Ascension, and as its additional cost, I get rid of a sword, and then I choose a sword from my material deck, and I will just re-choose or flicker that Sword of Avarice to draw 2 more cards. And if I have multiple Ascensions, then I can draw a lot of cards, and that is how that loop works. So Cruxite doesn't only grab Ascensions though, and in this deck, it can grab any Crux card, which is super powerful because we play a couple more that I'm gonna introduce. Let's talk about Incarnate Majesty first, because I have already brought it up. This is how we get the Majestic Spirit out, which is our finisher. It's also our protector. It does everything you could ever ask a card to do for you. Incarnate Majesty is a 12-cost card with class efficiency and also costs 1 less to activate for each Regalia weapon card in banishment. And it just puts a card named the Majestic Spirit from your material deck or banishment onto the battlefield. So this is how we get that card out. Hopefully we're playing this card for very little, if not free, to bring out our Majestic Spirit and then end the game after that. If we have to utilize one of these early against an aggressive deck to live, and then let's say they deal with our Majestic Spirit, and this is in our graveyard, we can utilize a Cruxite, using its 2 cards down, pay an additional 2 as you activate this card. If you do, banish this card as it resolves, and return a Crux element card from the graveyard to my hand, and draw a card to then potentially bring back out the Majestic Spirit if needed. So that's another card we can grab. And then we also play Ghost of Pendragon, which is just another way for us to draw 2 cards and leave a big beater on the field. Ghost of Pendragon has proved himself tenfold this format, just how powerful he is. As you can see, a lot of decks, specifically these guys, are playing 4 ghosts. We saw 3 ghosts. We've seen 2 ghosts. Even some lists that played 1 ghost last format. And in this, we're seeing 4 Ghost of Pendragon because people are realizing how powerful it is for 2 to play a 3/4 body that can help fight for board and also draw you 2 cards. So Ghost of Pendragon can also help with putting Regalia maybe you want to reuse back into your material deck to use later. Very strong card. We're going to see a lot of it, so definitely get used to it. Lastly, and the spiciest card in this list that a lot of people slept on and were not prepared for was Slay the King. Wow, what a card. I know a lot of Fire Merlin players did discover this card because it is very powerful for them. What this card is, it's a 2-cost attack warrior sword card. It does 4 damage, and with class bonus on attack, you may banish a card from your material deck. If you do, Slay the King gains on kill. You may play the banished card. So let me explain how that works a little bit. Or let me grab a card out of this material deck that I brought up earlier and said they could do some really cool things with. So let's say I was able to get to Crux first, and I, in my recollection, draw 8 cards because I get an Ascension loop going. I recollect, I go to my turn, my opponent has a Hasty Messenger on the field. I'm able to Slay the King, and on attack, I can banish a card, let's say Tithe Proclamation in this situation. I kill their Hasty Messenger, the Tithe Proclamation enters. I have to pay for it still. It doesn't play it for free, so I would have to get rid of one of the cards I put here. Tithe Proclamation is out. Now my opponent can only draw 3 cards each turn, and I just drew 8+. Now I'm way ahead of my opponent, and they can't catch up without blowing up this Tithe Proclamation, but at the same time, they don't want to do that because I can then continue to pop off. But it doesn't just have to be that. That's just a really cool combo you can do in the mirror. You can put any of these guys under there. Maybe you want to bring out a Prismatic Edge. Maybe you want to bring out the coolest one, and the easiest one I saw was just a Grand Crusader Ring. And bringing that out and being able to draw after killing some ally is super, super strong. So Slay the King, super cool card. Stocks are up. Pick up your playset. You're going to need them. And lastly, we're going to talk about this sideboard. Let's talk about the main deck sideboard first, which is going to be an extra Resolute stand. I already talked about it and what it's utilized for, and an extra to Disintegrate. You're going to need more of these in the matchups where they're really, really good. So I'm a huge, huge proponent of putting extra copies of cards that you need in certain matchups to fill up your ratios when you need them to. So these are pretty no-brainer in my opinion. We play 3 Sparklights. So these are awesome, and we do get the 3 unpreventable damage because we are a mage. So that class bonus is really relevant. This helps deal against ally-heavy decks, help trade out and kill things, and hey, sometimes we just need this to go upstairs and kill an opponent. Or to break a defensive card when we want to fireball somebody for 1,000,000 and they use a water barrier or an arcane spell shield. We can let their defensive card resolve, then cast our Sparklight before our fireball resolves to pop their defensive card, and then our fireball goes to work. Super strong card. We've seen a lot of it. You're going to see a lot of it more, specifically if you're an ally deck, so be prepared for it. And then the last 3 cards are going to be Regalia. So first off, we're going to talk about the Quicksilver Grail Nullifying Lantern combo. So graveyard decks, specifically Erupting Rhapsody, Fire Aggro Lorraine, mostly fire decks, are going to utilize their graveyard to do really powerful stuff. Nullifying Lantern stops it, but there are a lot of cards in this game that can just be played to destroy my Nullifying Lantern, and then I'm vulnerable, right? So, Quicksilver Grail. Excuse me. This new Divine Relic comes into play, and when it does, I banish a non-champion card from my material deck face down. In this situation, we'd almost always be bringing in Nullifying Lantern. This way, when they try to go to their kill turn or to do something big with their graveyard, I can banish my Quicksilver Grail to bring out Nullifying Lantern, and there's nothing that they can do about it as far as popping it before I deal with their graveyard play. This card just protects us from removal spells and allows us to bring this out at fast speed whenever we need it. So it's a super powerful 2-of. You're going to see a lot of this out of sideboards, respecting Erupting Rhapsody decks, respecting those Fire Aggro Lorraines. Just a very powerful 1-2 punch with Quicksilver Grail and Nullifying Lantern. And lastly, another very, very spicy card, Beastpawn Boots. So Beastpawn Boots it's a 0-cost Regalia item. It's actually a Tamer accessory, and it says, banish Beastpawn Boots. Your champion gains Spell Shroud until end of turn. Activate this ability only if you control an animal or beast ally. Well, we don't play a lot of them, but we do play one very important beast, and that is the Majestic Spirit. So, in mirrors specifically, we can bring out a Beastpawn Boots, and if our opponent is going for a kill, specifically maybe a double fireball, and they have to kill our Majestic Spirit and then kill us with fireballs because we currently have Spell Shroud, I can pop this Beastbound Boots, which will give me, the champion, Spell Shroud, regardless if they kill the Majestic Spirit. So it's a super cool, super clever way to give yourself Spell Shield on that turn when you really need it, if they're going to kill your Majestic Spirit. What a deck. Honestly, that was a super fun one to talk about, and it was one that I personally, and I know us here at True Champion Gaming, tested a lot before Ascent. And honestly, it was a heavy consideration when we were deciding what deck we were going to take. We almost were on Fire Merlin. So that deck is extremely powerful, definitely a contender for strongest deck in the format currently. You should know it because you're going to play against it, and if you don't play against it, you're probably playing it. So after that, guys, I just want to say a big thank you again for all the support. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Ding that little bell so that you see notifications whenever we post new videos. And also, don't forget to check out our new website where you can find anything from merch to links to all of our social media and much, much more. So again, thank you guys. Can't wait for the next video. I'll see you on the next one.